My name is Maria. This is a story of how an ordinary kitchen became a battlefield. It is a story of how a simple woman like me learned to be a soldier in a war she did not choose. This is a story of dust and love. This is a story of the unbreakable thread that stitches a family together when the very earth beneath them tries to tear them apart. You must first understand my world as it was. The kitchen was not just a room. It was my kingdom. The morning sun would pour through the window over the sink. It painted the tiles in warm gold. I knew every chip in the blue paint of the cupboards. I knew every slight squeak of the hinges on the pantry door. The refrigerator hummed a particular tune. It was a comforting basso continuo to my daily symphony. I measured my life in that room. The scents marked the hours. There was the dark, bitter promise of morning coffee. There was the rich onion and garlic softening in olive oil for the afternoon sofrito. There was the sweet cinnamon and vanilla of an evening cake. My hands knew the weight of my grandmother's wooden rolling pin. They knew the smooth coolness of the marble counter I had saved for years. The very lines on my palms were etched with flour and salt. My family orbited this heart. Louis, my husband, would come home from work. His tie was always loosened. His first stop was always here. He would steal an olive from the bowl or a slice of pepper. His kiss on my cheek tasted of the outside world. Alina, my 10-year-old daughter, did her homework at the kitchen table. Her brow was furrowed in concentration just like her father's. She would absent-mindedly twist a strand of her dark hair around a finger while solving math problems. My mother, Abuela Luz, would sit in the chair by the window. She would shell peas or mend socks. Her presence was a quiet, steady rhythm. It was like a gentle clock ticking beside us. This was my universe. It was complete and self-contained. I was the keeper of this hearth. I was the weaver of our daily comfort. I found profound joy in the simple geometry of a pie crust. I found joy in the perfect rise of a loaf of bread. This was my language. This was my prayer. This was my unshakable reality. The day it happened was a Tuesday. It was utterly ordinary. The sky was a pale, clear blue. I was preparing a roast chicken for dinner. It was the kind that cooks for hours. It filled the apartment with a savory perfume that promised home. Alina was at school. Louis was at a meeting downtown. Abuela Luz had gone for her afternoon rest at her own apartment. Her home was 5 miles away in the old quarter. I was alone with the sunlight. I was alone with the simmering potatoes. I was alone with the quiet hum of the appliance. The first tremor was a jolt. It was a violent upward thrust. It felt as if a giant hand had reached under the building and shoved it skyward. It was so sudden. It was so entirely alien that my mind could not process it. For a full second, I stood there. A dripping wooden spoon was in my hand. My brain insisted this was a dream. It insisted this was a trick. Then the rolling began. It was a deep, nauseating sway. It had no place on solid ground. The plates in my cherrywood cabinet began to chatter. It was a frantic, terrifying clatter. It grew into a crescendo as they slipped and crashed to the shelves below. The window over the sink bulged inward. The glass developed. A spidery web of cracks. It happened with a sound like gunshots. The light fixture above the table swung in a wild, widening arc. It cast demented shadows across the walls. I grabbed the edge of the marble counter. The cool stone was familiar and unyielding beneath my palms. The roar was unimaginable. It was not a sound from outside. It was the sound of the world itself tearing apart. It was a deep, grumbling groan from the bowels of the earth. It was mixed with the sharp, splintering cracks of concrete and timber. Then the lights went out. They went out with a small, popping sigh. They plunged the kitchen into a Stygian gray. The sunlight was gone. It was obscured by a massive plume of dust. The dust blotted out the sky across the street. A silence followed. It was a deafening, ringing silence. It lasted the space of a heartbeat. Then the sounds rushed in. There was the scream of twisted metal. There was the distant thud of something massive collapsing. There was the high, desperate wail of a car alarm. Underneath it all was a new sound. It was the sound of human dread. It was a collective moan that seemed to rise from the very pavement. My knees were liquid. My heart was a trapped bird beating against my ribs. I sank slowly to the floor. The tiles were cold and gritty with already settling dust. My mind was a white blank of panic. Then a single image burned through the fog. It was Alina's face. It was her first day of school. It was her brave smile under a too big backpack. Elena. Her name was a gasp. It was a prayer. It was an imperative. I tried to stand, but the world tilted again. It was an aftershock. It was a vicious reminder that this was not over. The floor bucked like a ship in a storm. I stumbled. I fell hard. My elbow connected with the tile. A bolt of pain shot up my arm. I crawled. It was the only locomotion that made sense in this new topsy-turvy reality. I crawled past the oven. The chicken still sat there. It was a surreal testament to interrupted normalcy. I crawled through a puddle of olive oil and shattered ceramic. The sharp fragments bit into my palms. The air was thick with the smells of spices and plaster. It was a choking, chalky mixture. My hand found the solid leg of the heavy oak kitchen table. I pulled my body under its shelter. It was a childish instinct to hide, but the solid press of wood against my back offered a sliver of primitive comfort. Here in the dark beneath the table, I tried to breathe. The aftershocks came in waves. Each one was a fresh assault on the nerves. It was a terrible game. The ground could betray you at any second. With each tremor, I heard new crashes from within the apartment. There was the sound of a bookshelf giving way. There was the tinkle of the remaining glass in the window finally succumbing. I fumbled in my pocket. My fingers closed around the smooth rectangle of my phone. It was a lifeline to the vanished world. I pressed the button. The screen flared to life. It was a blindingly bright rectangle in the dust-choked gloom. The time glowed 3:47 p.m., but the icons at the top told the truer story. There was no service. There was no signal. There were just empty bars. But before we continue, I want to extend a very specially invitation to you: subscribe the channel and leave a like. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories, and comment down below which city you are watching us from right now. Let's continue. A sob clawed its way up my throat. I swallowed it hard. I tapped Lewis's number. I listened to the dead silence. I tapped Elena's school number. Nothing. I tried my mother. Again and again. My thumbs moved with a frantic rhythm over the glass. It was as if I could force a connection through sheer will. The glow of the phone illuminated a small patch of floor beneath the table. And there I saw it. It was a crack. It was a thin, black line snaking across the tile. It had not been there yesterday. It was a hairline at my end. It widened as it traveled to the kitchen wall. There it disappeared into the baseboard. It was a silent, ominous message from the foundations of my home. This kitchen was my sanctuary. It was wounded. It was no longer safe. The voice inside me spoke now. It was the voice that knew when a cake was done. It was the voice that knew when Elena was getting a fever. It spoke now with cold clarity. Maria, you cannot stay here. They are not here. You must go. The decision solidified into a hard knot in my stomach. I had to move. Pushing the heavy table aside took every ounce of strength I had. Its legs screeched in protest against the tiles. The sound was eerily loud in the silence. I rose unsteadily to my feet. My legs trembled like a newborn foal. The landscape of my home was apocalyptic. The beautiful blue plates from my grandmother's dowry were a field of shards on the floor. The photographs that lined the hallway had all sailed from the walls. Their glass faces were smashed. They revealed smiling, frozen moments beneath the rubble. My books had been vomited from their shelves. Their pages were splayed like wounded birds. I picked my way through the wreckage. My slippers offered no protection. Each step was a calculation, where to place my foot amidst the chaos. The front door came into view. It was wedged shut. The frame was warped by the Quake's torque. I set my shoulder against the solid wood and pushed. A guttural grunt escaped my lips. The wood groaned. With a sudden lurch, the door swung open. It revealed a world transformed. The air outside was a solid thing. It was a swirling, soupy mixture of dust and smoke. It stung the eyes and coated the tongue. The late afternoon light filtered through this haze. It came in long, sickly orange beams. It gave the street an unearthly, Martian quality. The sound was a dull roar. It was a symphony of alarms and distant shouts. There was the ever-present undercurrent of sobbing. My street was a quiet residential lane. It was unrecognizable. A porch roof had collapsed. It crushed the car beneath it into a sculpture of twisted metal. A water main had erupted. It created a murky fountain that cascaded down the gutter. It carried with it bits of trash and children's toys. Neighbors began to emerge from their doors. Their faces were uniformly pale and coated in the omnipresent gray powder. They looked like ghosts stepping from their tombs. Their eyes were wide with shared trauma. I saw Mr. Antonopoulos. He was the elderly man from number 5. He tended his rose bushes with meticulous care. He stood motionless. He was staring at the front of his house. The entire second-floor balcony now lay in a heap of ornate iron and concrete on his beloved garden. His mouth hung open silently. I moved toward him. My voice was a croak. "Mr. Antonopoulos, are you hurt?" He turned slowly. His eyes took a long time to focus on me. He did not speak. He just shook his head. It was a tiny, helpless motion. Then his gaze returned to his ruined roses. The mother's logic took over. It was a ruthless, cold engine that overrode the paralysis of shock. Elena's school was closer than Louis's office. It was closer than my mother's apartment. The sequence was obvious. Find the closest piece of your heart first. I turned my back on my shattered home. I began to walk. Walking was an act of defiance. The pavement was a textured map of disaster. Webs of cracks radiated out from larger fissures. I had to climb over a spilled cascade of bricks from a garden wall. Their rough edges scraped my legs. Fallen wires coiled like sleeping snakes in the gutter. I gave them a wide berth. My mind was a litany of half-remembered warnings. I passed the small corner church. Its beautiful neo-Gothic facade was now scarred. A great stone gargoyle lay smiling. Its grotesque grin was intact amidst the rubble of the steps it had once adorned. On those very steps an old woman sat. I did not know her. She sat upright and still. She held a rosary. Her lips moved soundlessly in the din. Her eyes were fixed on the middle distance. She was seeing something none of us could. I paused. "Are you all right, Senora? Can I help you?" She turned those clear, aged eyes on me. "He is with us, child," she said. Her voice was surprisingly firm. "Even now, she is not alone." Her certainty was a tiny flame in the gloom. I nodded. I was unable to muster such faith. I pressed on. 2 blocks later, the scene grew more grim. A 4-story apartment building had suffered a pancake collapse. Its floors were compressed into a nightmare layer cake of concrete slabs and shattered furniture. A small crowd had already gathered. They were men and women. Their faces were set in masks of determined horror. They were digging with their bare hands. They were tossing aside chunks of plaster and splintered wood in a frenzied rhythm. As I watched, frozen, a muffled cry came from deep within the pile. It was a man's voice. It was calling, "Help us." The digging redoubled. The sound of scratching and grunting filled the air. I stood rooted. My feet seemed nailed to the spot. I should stay. I should help. The human impulse to aid was overwhelming. I took a step toward the pile. Then a memory surfaced. It was not an image, but a sound. It was Alina's laughter. It was the particular giggling squeal she made when Louis tossed her in the air when she was little. The sound was so vivid in my mind. It drowned out the noise around me. The cold mother's logic spoke again. Its voice was hard and clear. "Maria, you are one woman. You cannot move this mountain with your hands, but you have a mountain of your own to climb. Your strength must go to your child." The guilt was immediate and vicious. It was a serpent coiling in my gut. It felt like cowardice. It felt like the worst kind of selfishness. I looked at the desperate diggers. Their hands were already bleeding, and I made a vow. It was a promise spoken to the wind and dust. If I find them, if my family is whole, I will come back here, and I will dig until there is nothing left of my fingers. I swear it. I tore my eyes away from the tragedy. I forced my legs to move. Each step away from that pile felt like a moral failure, but I walked on. The route to the school was blocked. A majestic old oak tree had stood for a century in a small roundabout. It had been uprooted. Its tangled roots were thrust into the air like the claws of a fallen titan. Its massive trunk lay across the road. It was an impassable barrier of leafy green and exposed earth. My heart sank. This was a main artery. There was no way around, only through the maze of smaller residential streets. I stood before the fallen giant. I felt a profound despair. How many more obstacles? How many more blocks would this add to the journey? How much time? Just then I heard a voice. It was a teacher's voice. It was projecting calm over chaos. "Single file now, children, watch your step, this way." From a side alley, a line of children emerged. They were a ragged procession. Their faces were streaked with dirt and tears. Some were carrying backpacks. Others had lost them. Their small hands were clutching each other, or they were clutching the hands of the two teachers who led them. The teachers were a young woman and an older man. They had faces of forced serenity, but their eyes darted constantly. They were scanning the buildings above. They were assessing the danger. My eyes scanned the small faces. It was a frantic search for one familiar pattern of features. And then I saw her. She was near the back. She was holding the hand of a little boy who was crying quietly. She was looking down at her feet. She was concentrating on where to step. Her dark hair was white with dust. "Elena," I shouted. The word was ripped from me. Her head snapped up. Her eyes were huge in her grime-smudged face. For a second, she did not react. It was as if disbelieving her own ears. Then recognition flooded her features. Mama. She broke from the line and ran. She was stumbling over the uneven ground. I met her halfway. I sank to my knees as she collided with me. The force of her small body knocked the air from my lungs. I crushed her to me, my face buried in her hair. It smelled of dust and the peculiar sweet scent of schoolroom pencils. I inhaled it as if it were oxygen. She was whole. I ran my hands over her arms and her back. I was checking for injury. She was trembling. It was a fine, constant vibration like a plucked string. But she was in one piece. One of her bright red shoelaces had come untied. The banality of it was profound. The young teacher approached. She had a cut on her forehead. The blood had dried in a dark track down her temple. "We are taking them to the designated safe point at Mayor's Park," she said. Her voice was clipped and professional, but it cracked on the word park. "It is organized there. There will be water, first aid." "Thank you," I managed. The words seemed woefully inadequate for the debt I owed this woman. She had shepherded my child through Armageddon. I looked at her directly. "I have to find my husband and my mother." She nodded. It was as if this was the most normal statement in the world. Her eyes held mine for a second. There was a flash of empathy and shared horror. "Go," she said. "We have them." I took Elena's shoulders. I knelt before her. "Look at me, my love," I said. I was trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to find Papa and Abulita. I need you to be my big, brave girl. Can you stay right here with your teacher and your class? I will come back for you, I promise you." Her lower lip quivered, but she bit it. Her chin adopted that stubborn set. She had inherited it from my mother. "You promise. Promise, Mama." "I promise on Abulita's rose bush," I said. I was invoking a sacred family oath. That elicited a tiny nod. I kissed her forehead. My lips left a clean spot on her dusty skin. Then I watched as she rejoined the line. She took the hand of the crying boy again. She looked back once, and I forced a smile onto my face. It was a terrible, frail thing. Leaving her there was an act of profound self-violence. Walking away from that ragged line of children felt like tearing off a limb. I did not look back. I could not. I simply put one foot in front of the other, until the alley swallowed them from view. Now for Lewis. The expo grounds, the policeman had said. My mind clung to that sliver of information. It was a vast space on the riverbank. It was used for concerts and fairs. It made sense. It would be a gathering point. The journey downtown was a descent into a different circle of hell. Here the buildings were taller. The damage was more spectacular. Modern glass and steel towers stood naked. Their facades were sheared away. They revealed the intimate details of offices, a desk with a computer still on, a coat rack hanging a lonely suit jacket. The air here was filled with a fine glass dust. It sparkled malevolently in the fading light. It coated everything. It made the world glisten with a cruel, fake beauty. I stuck to the middle of the wider avenues where possible. I was avoiding the canopy of unstable facades. The groans and creaks from above were a constant, terrifying accompaniment. The aftershocks continued. Each one sent fresh avalanches of glass and masonry tumbling into the street. I learned to listen to the rumble in the ground. I learned to feel it build in my bones, and I would press myself against a solid-looking wall, or I would crouch in a doorway, until the violent shuddering passed. I passed a luxury department store. Its plate glass windows were all gone. The mannequins inside were still elegantly posed. They were now coated in gray powder. They were surrounded by a sea of broken crystal from the shattered chandeliers. A man in a security guard uniform sat on the curb. His head was in his hands. Further on, a cafe's sidewalk tables were still set for the afternoon coffee crowd. The cups and saucers had sailed off the tables. They lay broken on the ground. A single, untouched pastry sat on a plate in the middle of the sidewalk. It was a surreal still life. My throat was parched. It was aching with dust and fear. I came upon a small corner shop. It was the kind that sells newspapers and cigarettes and candy. The door was gone. The interior was dark. A man was inside. He was not looting. He was methodically pulling bottles of water from a fallen cooler. He was stacking them by the curb. As I passed, he looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. He held out a bottle. "Take," he said. His voice was hoarse for the journey. I stopped. I was stunned by this act of grace in the midst of chaos. "Thank you," I whispered. I took the plastic bottle. It was warm. But when I unscrewed the cap and took a sip, it was the most nectarous thing I had ever tasted. It was life itself. He nodded, and he went back to his work. He was a silent Samaritan in a broken world. The sun was sinking lower. The long shadows were blending with the general gloom. It was making it harder to see the dangers underfoot. The expo grounds were near the river. The smell of the water began to mix with the dust and smoke. It was a damp, organic scent. As I approached, a new sound grew. It was a vast murmur. It was like a distant stadium crowd. I topped a small rise, and the scene spread before me. It was a sea of humanity. Tens of thousands of people were clustered on the open fields. The scale was both awe-inspiring and deeply frightening. Makeshift tents had sprung up like strange mushrooms. They were made of sheets and poles. Lines snaked everywhere. There were lines for water. There were lines for medical attention. There were lines for information. Volunteers moved through the crowd. Their arms were full of blankets or boxes of crackers. The organization was emergent. It was chaotic, but it was there. The human instinct to cluster, to build order from chaos, was in full force. I stood at the perimeter. I was overwhelmed. How would I ever find one man in this multitude? I started walking the perimeter of the field. My eyes were scanning the endless faces. People were in various states of shock. Some sat staring blankly. Others tended to injuries. Some sought loved ones. They were calling names into a megaphone. It only added to the cacophony. The medical tents were the worst. I averted my eyes from the sight of bloodied limbs. I averted my ears from the groans of pain. I circled for what felt like hours. My hope dwindled with the light. Then I saw a flash of color. It was a familiar striped tie. Louis had worn it that morning. It was now dirty and torn, but it was his. He was sitting on the ground. His back was against the giant wheel of a parked ambulance. His head was bowed. His hands were resting open on his knees. It was as if in supplication or exhaustion. "Louis." He looked up. His face was a mask of gray dust and dried sweat. His eyes were usually so sharp and quick. They were dull and unfocused. It took a long moment for them to settle on me, for recognition to dawn. When it did, his entire body seemed to deflate. The last vestiges of tense energy left him in a rush. "Maria," he said, and my name on his lips was a sigh. It was a sigh of such profound relief it broke my heart. He tried to push himself up, but he cried out. He fell back, his face contorted in pain. His ankle was badly swollen. It was purpled and misshapen beneath the torn fabric of his trousers. A volunteer had wrapped it in a makeshift bandage. They had used a torn shirt. "It is sprained, maybe broken," he said through gritted teeth. "But it is nothing. It is nothing. You are here." "Alina," I said quickly. "She is safe. She is at Mayer's Park with her school." The news was a physical release for him. His head thumped back against the ambulance tire. He closed his eyes for a second. A single tear carved a clean track through the grime on his cheek. "Thank God," he whispered. "Oh, thank God." We sat together in silence for a long time. We sat in that island of relative calm amidst the sea of distress. We did not need words. The solid warmth of his shoulder against mine was a language deeper than speech. We passed the water bottle back and forth. Then I remembered the third piece of our heart. Abulita, I said softly. Louis's face darkened. He had seen more of the city's destruction on his hobbling journey here. The old quarter, Maria, he began. His voice was heavy. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The look in his eyes said it all. It had been hit hard. The ancient buildings were not made for such violence. I have to go, I said. The words left my mouth before I had fully formed the thought. Maria, no. Louis's hand shot out. It was gripping my wrist. The streets are not safe. It is almost dark. There are looters. There are desperate people. She is alone, Louis, I said. My voice was quiet, but it had a steel core he had never heard before. She is 72. She is afraid of the dark. You know how the shadows confuse her since Papa died. He knew, he argued, but it was half-hearted. His eyes fell to his useless ankle. A look of profound frustration and shame crossed his face. I am coming with you. I will find a crutch. A stick. No, I said. It was with a finality that brooked no argument. You will stay here. And you will get someone to help you, a medic. Anyone. You will get to Mayor's Park. You will go to Alina. You will be with her. That is your job now. My job is to bring your mother to you. It was an order from the general I had become. He searched my face. He saw the unyielding resolve. It was the same flint that had gotten me across the shattered city. He nodded once. It was a sharp, military gesture. A passing medic gave me supplies. She was a young woman with kind, tired eyes. She gave me a fresh bottle of water. She gave me a small flashlight. It was the kind mechanics use. Its beam was a thin but piercing blue-white lance in the gathering gloom. She also pressed a protein bar into my hand. Eat it, she said. You will need the strength. I thanked her. I turned back to Louis. I will find her, I said. Bring her home, he replied. And in those 3 words lay the weight of our world. The journey to the old quarter was the longest and darkest passage of my life. The sun had fully set now. The only light came from the fires. They burned unchecked in several parts of the city. Their glow reflected off the bellies of the smoke clouds. It created a shifting, hellish orange twilight. My flashlight beam was a tiny bubble of reality. It was a bubble in an ocean of surreal horror. The character of the destruction changed here. The narrow cobblestone streets were charming in guidebooks. They had proved deadly. The close-packed medieval buildings had leaned on each other. Many had fallen together. It was a domino effect of timber and crumbling stone. The air was different. 2, there was less glass dust. There was more the smell of old plaster. There was the smell of pulverized wood. There was the peculiar scent of old houses. Their hidden lives were exposed. I called for her. My voice grew hoarser with each block. Mama, Mama Luz. The only replies were echoes. There was the occasional scuttle of a rat. There was the distant cry from within a ruin. The streets were narrower here. The piles of rubble were higher. I had to climb over mounds of splintered beams and crumbled masonry. My hands became raw. My knees ached. I recognized landmarks. There was the ornate iron cross of the San Telmo pharmacy. It now lay bent in the street. There was the mosaic sign for the Taberna del Rey. It was half buried under bricks. I was getting close. I turned onto her street. It was Cal de las Flores. It had been a picturesque lane. There were flower boxes on every wrought iron balcony. The scent of jasmine was in the evenings. Now it was a canyon of debris. Not a single building stood intact. They had folded inward, or they had collapsed onto the street. They created a nearly impassable valley of destruction. My flashlight beam played over the nightmare scene, and then it settled. It settled on number 14. It was my mother's building, or rather, the space where it had been. There was no structure. There was only a mound. It was a heap of whitewashed plaster. It was splintered dark wood beams. It was shattered red roof tiles. It was utterly flattened. It was as if a massive fist had smashed straight down from the sky. The world stopped. The sounds faded. The dust in my throat turned to ash. I stood paralyzed. The flashlight beam trembled wildly in my hand. No. It was not a shout. It was a gasp. It was the last bit of air leaving a punctured lung. All the strength evaporated. All the desperate hope that had fueled my marathon across the city evaporated in that instant. It left me a hollow, brittle shell. I sank to my knees on the hard cobblestones. The impact was unfelt. No, 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 no. The word was a useless incantation. It was a whisper against the monumental fact of that rubble pile. My mind could not encompass it. This was where she had lived. This was where she had raised me. This was where the smell of her rose geranium so permanently lingered. It was gone, and she was gone with it. I doubled over. My forehead pressed against the cold, gritty stones. A wave of grief washed over me. It was so vast and black. It threatened to pull me under entirely. I had failed. It was the final and most sacred duty. I had promised Lewis I would bring her home, and here I was. I was alone in the dark before her grave. A sound came. It was a weak cough. It came from my left. It was not from the mountain of rubble. It was from the side of the street. I jerked my head up. The flashlight beams swayed erratically. There was a figure. It was propped against the shattered remains of a rusted bicycle. It was on a pile of broken furniture. It was under what remained of the collapsed awning of the corner bodega. It was a ghost. It was coated head to toe in a fine white powder. It was so thoroughly coated that it blended with the pale plaster dust around it. It was small and hunched. A blanket was wrapped around its shoulders. In its arms, it cradled an object. "Mama," I croaked. The word was barely audible. The figure stirred. The blanket shifted. Two familiar eyes blinked open. They were the clearest, warmest brown. They squinted against the beam of my light. "Maria, is that you? You came all this way in the dark." Her voice was a dry rustle. It was like leaves, but it was her voice. It was undeniably her. A sound erupted from me. It was part laugh. It was part sob. It was part howl. I scrambled on hands and knees. I scrambled across the few feet that separated us. "You are here. How are you hurt? Let me see." I ran my hands over her arms, over her legs, over her face. I was wiping away the dust. She seemed intact. She was unbelievably whole. "I was on the staircase," she whispered. She was leaning into my touch. When it started, I held the railing so tight. It was like riding a bull at the feria. Then everything came down around me, but not on me. It was like the building spit me out. I landed here with Senator Garcia's flowers. She looked down at the object in her arms. It was a terracotta pot. It was split cleanly in half. The soil was mostly gone, but the geranium plant still held together by its roots. A few bright red blooms were defiantly cheerful in the gloom. I could not find my glasses. It was a miracle. It was so simple. It was so staggering it defied logic. The collapsing structure must have ejected her through an opening. It must have tossed her clear onto a pile of soft debris. That debris cushioned the fall, while the world crashed down behind her. I laughed. It was a wild, unhinged sound. It echoed in the empty street. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. They were cutting tracks through the dust on my cheeks. I laughed with the sheer absurd joy of it. "We have to go, Mama," I said. I was wiping my eyes. "We have to get to the park. Lewis and Alina are waiting." She nodded. It was as if this was a perfectly reasonable suggestion for an evening stroll. "Help me up, my dear. My legs are not what they were." I gently helped her to her feet. She was light as a bird. Her bones were like twigs beneath the blanket. She leaned heavily on me. She took small, tentative steps. We began our slow, epic trek back through the night. We were a trio now. It was me, my mother, and the halved geranium. The journey back was a slow-motion nightmare. My mother's pace was painfully measured. We had to stop every few yards. She needed to catch her breath, or I needed to clear a path over smaller piles of rubble. The flashlight beam was our tiny universe. It revealed one step at a time. It revealed the terrain of apocalypse. We navigated around yawning craters. They were where sewer lines had collapsed. We passed silent ambulances. Paramedics still worked there by lantern light. We stepped over the bodies of those who had not been as lucky as we were. The darkness was alive with sounds. There was the distant crash of an aftershock. It was toppling some already precarious wall. There was the occasional shout of a rescue team. There was the relentless barking of a lost dog. During one rest stop, we sat on the curb of a vanished street. My mother sipped from the water bottle. She handed it back to me, and she patted my hand with her papery one. "You are a brave woman, Maria," she said. "I am not brave, Mama," I said. My voice was thick with exhaustion. I have been terrified since the moment it started. My knees have been shaking so hard I thought they would crack. "Bravery," she said. Her wise old eyes were glinting in the flashlight's backscatter. "Is not the absence of that shaking. It is doing what must be done, even though you are sure you cannot. I have heard your knees knocking all the way from my street. They are quite loud." I leaned my head against her shoulder. The familiar scent of her rose geranium soap was still detectable. It was detectable beneath the overpowering smell of dust. For a moment, I was a little girl again. We pressed on. The night seemed eternal, but gradually the quality of the darkness changed. The fires glowed brighter. The murmur from the expo grounds grew into a roar, and then we were on the final approach. The vast field stretched before us. It was now lit by dozens of makeshift lights. There were generators and car headlights. There were fires in steel drums. The park was a city now. It was a tent city of survivors. The order was more pronounced. Volunteers in identifying vests directed traffic. Medics had established proper stations. They had triage areas. Lines for food and water snaked, but they moved with a purpose. The collective shock was beginning to morph. It was morphing into a grim, determined endurance. I called out Lewis's name. My voice was a raspy thread in the vast hum. "Mama." Alina's voice was a silver bell of pure joy. She came sprinting from the direction of a large Red Cross tent. Lewis was behind her. He was hobbling determinedly on a proper crutch now. His bad leg was bound in a fresh bandage. He was being helped by a young man in a volunteer vest. Our reunion was not dramatic. It was a collapse. It was a gentle implosion of 4 separate gravities. They were pulling back into one single orbit. We sank to the ground in a clutch. We sank by the roots of a great spreading tree. Alina burrowed into my side. Lewis threw an arm around us all, and my mother sat beside me. She was still clutching her broken flower pot. We were a unit again. We were battered. We were fragmented, but we were whole. A volunteer brought us blankets and more water. A doctor checked my mother. She pronounced her dehydrated and in shock, but she was remarkably uninjured. She checked Lewis's ankle. She confirmed it was a bad sprain. It was not broken. She cleaned the cuts on my hands and arms. Her touch was gentle and professional. We slept there that night. We slept under the open sky. We were huddled together for warmth. The ground was hard. The air was chilled. But the heat of our togetherness was a fortress. It was a fortress against the world. We were surrounded by thousands, yet in our little circle we were alone, and we were complete. The days that followed were a new kind of life. We became citizens of the park. We learned its rhythms. There was the morning distribution of bread and fruit. There was the afternoon arrival of aid trucks. There was the evening roundup of information on a central bulletin board. We stood in lines for everything, and in those lines, community was forged. We met the taxi driver from our street. It was Mr. Antonopoulos. He had lost his wife in the collapse. He would save a piece of fruit for Alina every day. The shopkeeper who had given me water arrived with a truckload of supplies. His own shop was looted, but his spirit was unbroken. I kept my promise. On the 3rd day, I was sure my family was settled. I returned to the collapsed building near my home. I joined the diggers. They were the men and women from the neighborhood. They were strangers who had come to help. We dug with shovels. We dug with our hands. We passed buckets of debris in a human chain. We dug for hours, and we did find people. Some were alive. They were trapped in pockets of space. Their rescue was accompanied by cheers. The cheers echoed through the ruined streets. Others we found were not alive, and those moments were carried out in a silence. It was a silence so profound, it was heavier than the stones we moved. I dug until my fingers were raw and bleeding. I dug until my back screamed in protest. I fulfilled my vow. The guilt for walking away that first day was not erased, but it was honored. And in the shared labor, in the unspoken camaraderie of grief and hope, I found a sliver of peace. Our apartment building was deemed uninhabitable. The crack in the kitchen wall was a fatal flaw. Engineers marked it with a red X. It was the symbol of condemnation. We were allowed one brief, supervised visit. It was to retrieve belongings. Standing in my kitchen again was a profoundly strange experience. The sunlight still fell through the cracked window, but the room was a fossil of a past life. I gathered what I could. I gathered my grandmother's recipe book. I gathered the photographs I could salvage from the broken frames. I gathered a few pieces of silverware. The marble counter was chipped and stained now. It was a battle scar from a war it had lost. We moved into temporary housing. It was a small apartment in an undamaged part of the city. It was provided by an international aid group. The kitchen is a fraction of the size. It is a narrow galley. It has a tiny window that looks onto a brick wall. But every morning I make coffee in that kitchen. I stand on steady floors, and I am grateful. The city slowly began to heal. The rubble was cleared. The sounds of construction replaced the sounds of collapse, but the invisible cracks remained. They remained in all of us. My mother lives with us now. Her geranium was repotted. It thrives on our balcony. It is a splash of defiant red against the urban gray. Alina has nightmares sometimes, and we all crowd into her bed. We stay until the fear passes. Louis's ankle healed, but he walks with the slightest limitation. It is a permanent reminder. And me, I learned that courage is a quiet, persistent thing. It does not roar. It whispers. It is the voice that says get up when every muscle aches. It is the hand that reaches for the next handhold when the world has turned to sand. It is the decision to walk away from one tragedy to address another. And it is the strength to return and face it later. My bravery was not special. It was the universal bravery of love. It is the kind that exists in countless kitchens around the world. It is the love that makes ordinary women do extraordinary things, not because we are heroes, but because the people we love are our world. And when the world shakes, we become its unlikely foundation. So I stand in my small new kitchen, and I roll out dough, I chop vegetables, I stir the pot. The scents are the same, the love is the same. The world outside is still unpredictable, but in here we have built a new hearth. We built it stone by stone. We built it memory by memory, and we tend its flame together.